So today we will talk about what a function is and what determines if a function is a function or not. First of all, the definition of a function: it is an equation for which any x value input domain will give exactly one y value, an output or range. Next, let's talk about what makes a function a function. There are two characteristics. First, you'll need to check to see if there are any repeating x values. Check for repeating x values. No x values repeat this function. If the x values repeat, it's not a function. Okay. The second way you can determine a function is called the vertical line test. And with the vertical line test, if it passes, it is a function. And if it does not pass, then it is not a function. There is no function. Now, let's see some examples of what actually is a function. First, we'll talk about ordered pairs or a relation. In ordered pairs, you'll have your x, y, so in this set of ordered pairs, if we look at our x values only, the y's essentially don't matter because we're only concerned with x. We have a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4. None of these numbers repeat, so this is considered a function. Even though we have 2 y values that repeat, that's okay. The only value we're concerned with is the x. So now let's look at a table. I'm just labeling it input and output so you know that x is also called the input and y is also called the output. -1, 1, 6, and 20. 5, 4, 8, and 8. Okay. All of these numbers are single numbers that do not repeat. But in my Y column, I do have 2 repeating 8s. Remember, our Y's do not matter. We're only concerned with the X column. And because we have no repeating X's, this is also considered a function. Let's look at a mapping next. If we look at this mapping, we can determine that this is indeed a function because for every X, there's only one Y. Or, I'm sorry, there's only one X. And finally, with a graph, this is where we would use the vertical line test to determine if something were a function or not. And this won't be exact, but for the purposes of note taking, it's plenty sufficient. And we will take our line. We have a transparency with a vertical line drawn on it. And we pass our line over our graph. And we know that if we had repeating X's, it would show in our vertical line test because the vertical line would cover the graph where the X coordinates were. But if you notice, there are no vertical lines in our graph, so we know that this is a function. Now, let's look at non-examples of functions. Let's look at a relation or ordered pairs again. In this set of ordered pairs, we have -2, 6, -2, 8, 6, 3, and 7, 2. If we notice, we have 2 -2's in the X place. This means we have repeating X's, and thus this is not a function. Makes it not a function. Let's look at a table. We'll put our input, X, output, Y. Okay. Let's go ahead and get these other things out of the way so they're not so confusing. And let's say we have -3, -1, 0, and -3, -6, 2, 12, and 13. Again, we're not even going to focus on this column because it doesn't matter. We're only concerned with the X column. And because I have repeating -3's here, this is also not a function. Let's look at a mapping. A domain, X, and range is Y. -8, -1, 0, 15, 7, 9. Arrow from -8 to 7. Let's go. -1, 9, 0, 9, 15, 7, 15, 9. Now let's do our highlighter test, shall we? So 1x, 1, 1, 1, 2. So that is not a function because the 15 in the domain, or X value, repeats with 7 and 9. Finally, let's take a look at a graph that would not pass the vertical line test. Okay. Let's get our vertical line. And as we pass the vertical line over the graph, and we get to here, this makes a vertical line, which means we would have repeating X values. Because we know that when a line is vertical, the Y values with the corresponding X would always reference the same X. So for example, if this were, say, X is 4, well, this would be, not X is 4, I'm sorry. Yes, X is 4, and then Y would be 1, X would be 4, Y would be 2, X would be 4, Y would be 3, so on and so forth. Notice the X would repeat, but the Y's wouldn't. So anytime you see a vertical line, it's definitely not going to pass the test.